Hi, my name's Doug Roberts. I do architectural restoration, mostly woodwork, recreating often lost features. My best known project was the restoration at the Gladstone Hotel in Toronto. What we have here is a very perfect example of a Queen Anne style farmhouse. It has all the defining characteristics. It has this steep roof and with also lots of complications and hips. It has two decorative gables presenting to the street with wood turnings and shaped shingles. It has a 70-foot long porch that wraps around the side and the front of the building. That detail is one of the main things that we're restoring at the moment. It also has a broken facade. Like a Queen Anne would never have just a flat face. It has, this bay coming in and out, and it has the balcony, and it has the different textures of the brick and the shingles. So Queen Anne would never have just a simple flat facade, always lots happening, which is maybe one of the reasons the style lasted into the 20th century, pretty much the only Victorian style to do so. In our particular case, the original front porch was torn off, and unhappily somebody just put a little square structure like a mudroom there. Completely spoiled the appearance of the house and also obscured like how beautiful it really is. So as you can see right now, we're recreating the front pediment and balcony, which were original features of the house. And soon we'll be able to show you the arched roofed decorated balcony in a much more complete state. Also, as you see, we are just about to add our column. So right now, this is a rough-in, but very soon I hope to show you these features made to match with the original gables that are providing the example of a style for us as we move forward in this restoration. So this was once a beautiful example of a typical Queen Anne style porch, which ran all the way along the side for 50 feet and curved another 20 around the front. Being a late Queen Anne, it had sort of neoclassic columns. But by the time we came along to restore this structure, the original columns were badly decayed, and most of the bottoms were rotted off. The roof structure was sagging, and the deck was completely lost. We're putting it all back as was, but with a little enhancement. This is an original column that we've restored, but we had to lose the lower section, which had decayed away. So we've taken the liberty of adding a little pedestal, which I think is a graceful addition to the column, and lets us keep the original artifact as well in place. So these were very interesting original columns. They were turned out of a single log, which is quite unusual. They held up well for that. They originally had bases such as these, which we have recreated. But in order to make up for the parts of this thing which unfortunately decayed away, we've given it a nice classic pedestal, and it actually enhances the proportions of the whole column. And we've reinforced all the original beam, and we've still got to tend to its appearance, and all the attachment of the porch to the house is being reinforced. One of the amazing things about this porch is that It stood for 110 years, lightly made, badly tended to, with the columns decaying and falling away. And yet it was well enough built and engineered that it stood there unsupported until we came along. We're going to use bright colors to pick up all the architectural detailing, which right now is looking rather shabby, but we can get back into very nice shape. So at one time the house had a balcony on the front porch, and we could only speculate what it looked like from patterns on the wall, but there seemed to be an arched roof, so we've replicated that here. So we've used pine, and we've used 7 laminations, it is, of pine, and bent them over a mold with waterproof glue, and beaded the lower edge for decoration. And then we've tied our beams together with pine tongue and groove, and sitting on built-up beams. We're probably going to just put an oil finish on the pine because it's quite lovely, except on the exterior surfaces and the beams, which will be colored. We're going to take it outside and just drop it onto some recreated columns that, again, we know what they look like because of the outline in paint that was left on the brick walls. So we had those reproduced, and we'll just pick this structure up in one piece and lower it onto the columns and then secure it to the wall. That type of operation is actually quite a lot of fun. Restoration work often involves detective work as well, and one of the very helpful set of clues that we can work with are the faint outlines of paint, where something's been painted repeatedly and just the little bits of overpaint leave the outline of the object. Here we have some very nice clean lines, and these lines again are indicating the outside edge of a column. We can see where it had the little bulge called a torus. Came back in, and there we see very clearly the outline of the capital. And above the capital we can see the 2 sides of a beam projecting out from the house, above the edge of a rafter extending out from the beam. So we have redesigned this based on this paint, this memory paint that we have here. And it appears that there was an arching line going up over to the other side. That suggested to me that, and following this line too, that we were looking at a curved roof. It was quite unusual and seemed a wonderful decorative idea. Well, we're very lucky with this house to have the original door in actually remarkably good condition. You can see it's got a beautiful 5-panel design. It has wonderfully imaginative decorative framing of the window, and even some of the original hardware. The door itself is pine. Unfortunately, we're missing the original bell, but that's something that we can probably pick up at a restoration shop. And we'll just do a bit of refinishing, but this door is in amazingly good condition, and it's original to the house. And as you see, it also has the decorative spindles up above. So we'll be doing everything we can to highlight these features and bring them all back into good condition. In restoring an old house, one of the critical factors is to maintain the windows and doors with their original appearance and characteristics. Although styles were starting to simplify going into the early years of the 20th century, this house retains a lot of delightful Victorian detailing. Among them you can see the turned spindles that run across between the upper and lower windows, the lovely stained glass window work, and the shaped moldings of the jambs. When you see like replacement windows that are like vinyl or aluminum and lose the arches, lose all the beautiful molding details, it detracts from the house severely. We've decided to maintain the original windows, which are beautifully built, excellently done, and upgrade them, make them more thermally insulated and fitted and sealed. And then again, use paint to bring out just how beautiful they are. Here we're looking at the steep pitched roof with its hip ends, which is so typical of the Queen Anne houses. And also at the tall and decorative chimney. Originally this house had 3 chimneys. When we came on scene it had none. But they were kind of an essential decorative element of the building, and as well as functional at a time when people needed a chimney for the cook stove as well as for the furnace. So we're keeping just the one, and we've recreated it from photographs of the house from around 1909. It's not as elaborate as often as they could be, but they always were tall, always stepped out and then came back in. I was very happy that we were able to fit it into the budget to put it there, because otherwise the house just looks like it's missing something. So we're standing in the parlor of the farmhouse. And this would have been the room where the family had guests, and they would want it to be the nicest room in the house. And they've lavished a lot of money on the woodwork in here. The windows, the pocket doors, the baseboards are all bird's eye maple, which was then as now rare and expensive. And you can see that like the doors, which are actually made out of elm, but they have they're beautifully veneered with bird's eye maple, as are these fancy casings. So this would, when you had Sunday guests over, you'd sit with them in this room with the door closed and be protected from the clattering and commotion in the kitchen. Here we have the entrance door from the hallway, and it's made the same way as our beautiful pocket doors. The door itself is lovely elm wood, probably from a tree that grew right near here and went through a local sawmill. And when you close the door, once again we're back to the beautiful bird's eye veneers. And these finishes have actually survived very nicely for their age. But we're going to have Ray Carew, who's a real genius at finishes, go over these doors and make them look their very best. You can see also that the casing is bird's eye maple, as all the other work is. Looking at the baseboards, we can see that they're very beautiful bird's eye maple, a 2-piece assembly, and quite robust. And they also, they've suffered a bit more over time. So Ray will have his job cut out for him, removing just the top layers of finish and bringing back like the real beauty of this wood, which when the finish is right, it looks extraordinary. The floors in the Ivy farmhouse are very interesting. In some ways typical of the period, and in some ways quite unusual. The house doesn't use any subfloors. It's one level floor, both upstairs and down. Upstairs, they've used random width pine. Now, random width was mostly out of fashion by then. You know, the sawmills just turned out the boards whatever size that suited them, and whoever laid the floor fit them together. But it was out of practice because they had better sawmills and they were producing standard sizes. But oddly, this house, and charmingly, has random width floors throughout most of the house. Pine upstairs and maple downstairs. And we'll have a closer look at how those are put together. This room, though, the parlor, they wanted a fancy modern floor. So it's a little dirty right now, but we can see it's a red oak floor in long, narrow strips. And this is the only room they used it in. It would have been expensive, but again, they were trying to make this room special. This room, unfortunately, was left unheated for a very long time through damp weather, and the oak swelled, and swelled in the middle until the pieces in the center were popped up. You can see how narrow this red oak is, and this would have been a very modern innovation in 1904 when this floor was laid. And these are the pieces that have buckled, and they've been sticking up like that and damaged. It's because the whole floor had expanded and there was no place to go, so it just popped up this middle section. And we will have to make a decision whether or not to replicate this piece or if we can reuse it. And then the floor, again, will have the careful attention of Ray Carew, the master refinisher. So I have here 3 samples from different places in the house that illustrate the original floors. This is a narrow random width piece from what was once the dining area, and it's made out of hard maple. Here is a piece of pine flooring from the second floor. So again, the first floor got the more valuable wood, and the upstairs, which was just for the family, had the pine. And then here we have a piece of the kitchen flooring, and you'll notice it's very thick. It's 1 1/8 inch thick, and it oddly has an offset tongue. The tongue's set very low on the board instead of being centered, which I've never seen before. But all 3 together, they show us the random width aspect of the floors in this house. The boards can go anything from like 4.5 inches wide right down to 2 inches wide, and each row is going to be a different width. So random width boards had been common for centuries, but had gone almost entirely out of use by the time this house was built. So perhaps somebody just had a fancy for this, or perhaps some local sawmill had made it and managed to sell it. But you'll see the width of each plank is different. 3, 2.5, 3, 2, 3.5, 2. Some of them are as large as 4 or 4.5 inches, and the smallest just 2 inches. So it would have made the work of the person laying the floor a lot more difficult, and I don't think modern flooring installers would have much patience for the work this required. But again, there's no subfloor over this. It's just the one layer of 7/8 hard maple, and it's held up very well. Unlike a lot of modern floors, which are quite short-lived, this one, after 100 years, can look quite beautiful again after simple sanding. And we're going to stick with just an oil finish because like these old floors look best with just a low gloss, natural looking finish. And oil finish will actually hold up very well to traffic. There was a sudden and dramatic change in the styling of house exteriors and interiors that happened right at the transition from the 19th to the 20th centuries. The Queen Anne style was, for a few years, as much into 10 years, a holdout, and definitely a Victorian style house in a period that had turned away from ornamentation. This is the main stair railing, and whereas most houses by 1904 would just have square railings and a very simple newel post, our Queen Anne here has a beautiful, robust newel post, lovely turned balusters, probably made in a local shop, and then wonderful array of little decorative notions. They've got beaded paneling laid on diagonal, some elm paneling, and back here, oddly, seems like a natural place to put a cabinet, but this is still just the, I guess it's all elm paneling, but some flat and some beaded. So this baluster actually has survived its 100 years in fairly good condition. Right now it's dusty and dirty, and it's got little problems with the finishes here and there. But it won't take a lot for somebody of Ray Carew's talent to make this thing gleaming and beautiful again. And I, for one, am very glad that they stuck to their Victorian tastes and gave us this lovely little bit of playful woodwork here. The doors on the second floor of the house are both unique and lovely. You can see the overall pattern, the 7-panel pattern is quite elegant. They have turned wooden knobs that are quite beautiful. They're extremely delicately made. I mean, these doors are only 1 1/8 of an inch thick. But what's really special about them is that they have faux wood grain done beautifully well. Over previous several centuries, it's been popular to take cheap wood, in this case these doors are pine, and paint them to look like something more expensive. So this is done to look like the bird's eye maple, the real bird's eye maple down in the parlor. But in this case, it's all done with paint. And faux wood graining can be quite boring, but if the person, the artist, is a little bit flamboyant, and maybe the work isn't perfectly realistic, it makes a much more exciting little work of folk art. And I definitely think these doors deserve to be considered examples of folk art. It's very much a lost talent now. Like, hardly anybody does that. And you have to, like, if these are repaired at all, Ray Carew, who's going to be doing it, he has to take a practice panel and develop, rediscover the style and technique of whoever first did this door. If you look on the back of this door, it's a little secret that it's just a cheap knotty pine door, beautifully made and very delicate, but it wasn't considered attractive enough to let it show on its own. This entry door to the master bedroom is a fun little piece, and it's showing a little bit of wear and tear, and also it's the dirty little secret that it's pine can be seen in a few places where the resin from the knots has shown through. But I don't think that detracts from the door at all. And the relatively minor blemishes Ray will be able to take care of. An amusing thing about this door is to match the decor in here, the inside of the door is bird's eye maple. But its identity changes completely on the outside where it's done to look like quarter-sawn oak, which was very popular in those days. In trying to imitate quarter-sawn oak, the artist has attempted to imitate the medullary rays that you see in the oak with little streaks of paint and squiggles and dashes, because the quarter-sawn rays sort of make bright, flashy patterns on quarter-sawn oak. So they've done their best, using their imagination, to try to imitate it. And what they've come up with is a little unrealistic, a little crazy, and very handsome. And I think that a really attractive piece of faux wood grading, you always want it to be a little bit flamboyant, a little bit unrealistic. It makes for much more interesting work. So we're standing now in a room that it's a bedroom, but its small size suggests maybe that it was a nursery. It's hard to say. But it also is the door that led out to the balcony. And after many decades, I suppose, the balcony became rotten, and this became a window, and the wall was raised. But it was easy to see when we examined the evidence that indeed it had been infill there, and it was quite certain that a door had been here, proving the evidence we saw outside on the wall that there had been a balcony here. So we've removed now all that infill, removed the window, and the next step is to put the door back in. And right now we're restoring the door. It luckily was still on site. It had been used as a mudroom door after it was removed and the balcony was removed.